Chapters 1 through 5 of Laugh and Live. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tom Weiss. Laugh and Live by Douglas Fairbanks. Chapter 1. Whistle and Ho, Sing as We Go. There is one thing in this good old world that is positively sure. Happiness is for all who strive to be happy, and those who laugh are happy. Everybody is eligible. You, me, the other fellow. Happiness is fundamentally a state of mind, not a state of body. And mind controls. Indeed, it is possible to stand with one foot on the inevitable banana peel of life, with both eyes peering into the great beyond, and still be happy, comfortable, and serene. If we will even so much as smile. It's all a state of mind, I tell you, and I'm sure of what I say. That's why I have taken up my fountain pen. I want to talk to my friends, you hosts of people who have written to me for my recipe. In moving pictures, all I can do is act my part and grin for you. What I say is a matter of your own inference, but with my pen I have a means of getting around the silent drama which prevents us from organizing a close-up with one another. In starting, I'm going to ask you foolish question number 1. Do you ever laugh? I mean, do you ever laugh right out, spontaneously, just as if the police weren't listening with drawn clubs and a finger on the button connecting with the hurry-up wagon? Well, if you don't, you should. Start off the morning with a laugh and you needn't worry about the rest of the day. I like to laugh. It is a tonic. It braces me up, makes me feel fine, and keeps me in prime mental condition. Laughter is a physiological necessity. The nerve system requires it. The deep, forceful chest movement in itself sets the blood to racing, thereby livening up the circulation, which is good for us. Perhaps you hadn't thought of that. Perhaps you didn't realize that laughing automatically reoxygenates the blood, your blood, and keeps it red. It does all of that, and besides, it relieves the tension from your brain. Laughter is more or less a habit. To some it comes only with practice. But what's to hinder practicing? Laugh and live long. If you had a thought of dying, laugh and grow well. If you're sick and despondent, laugh and grow fat. If your tendency is towards the lean and cadaverous, laugh and succeed. If you're glum and unlucky, laugh and nothing can faze you, not even the grim reaper, for the man who has laughed his way through life has nothing to fear of the future. His conscience is clear. Wherein lies this magic of laughter? For magic it is, a something that manufactures a state of felicity out of any condition. We've got to admit its charm. Automatically and inevitably, a laugh cheers us up. If we are bored, nothing to do, just laugh. That's something to do, for laughter is synonymous with action, and action dispels gloom, care, trouble, worry, and all else of the same ilk. Real laughter is spontaneous. Like water from the spring, it bubbles forth a creation of mingled action and spontaneity, two magic potions in themselves, the very essence of laughter, the unrestrained emotion within us. So, for me, it is to laugh. Why not stick along? The experiment won't hurt you. All we need is willpower, and that is a personal matter for each individual to seek and acquire for himself. Many of us already possess it, but many of us do not. Take the average man on the street, for example. Watch him go plodding along. No spring, no elasticity, no vim. He is in check rein. How can he laugh when his pep is all gone and the sand in his craw isn't there any more? What he needs is spirit, energy, the power to force himself into action. For him there is no hope unless he will take up physical training in some form that will put him in normal physical condition. After that, everything simplifies itself. The brain responds to the new blood in circulation, and thus the mental processes are ready to make a fight against the inertia of stagnation which has held them in bondage. And mind you, physical training doesn't necessarily mean going to an expert for advice. One doesn't have to make a mountain out of a molehill. Get out in the fresh air and walk briskly. And don't forget to wear a smile while you're at it. Don't overdo. Take it easy at first and build on your effort day by day. A little this morning, a little more tonight. The first chance you have, when you're sure of your wind and heart, get out upon the country road or cross-country hill and dale. Then run, run, run until you drop exhausted upon some grassy bank. Then laugh loud and long, for you're on the road to happiness. Try it now. Don't wait. Today is the day to begin. Or, if it is night when you run across these lines, drop this book and trot yourself around the block a few times. Then come back and you'll enjoy it more than you would otherwise. Activity makes for happiness as nothing else will, and once you stir your blood into little bubbles of energy, you will begin to think of other means of keeping your bodily house in order. Unless you make a first effort, the chances are you will do very little real thinking of any kind. We need pep to think. Think what an opportunity we missed when stripped at night if we fail to give our bodies a round of exercise. It is so simple, so easy, and has so much to do with our sleep each night and our work next day, that to neglect to do so is a crime against nature. And laugh. Man alive, if you are not in the habit of laughing, get the habit. Never miss a chance to laugh aloud. Smiling is better than nothing, and a chuckle is better still, but out-and-out laughter is the real thing. Try it now if you dare, and when you've done it, analyze your feelings. I make this prediction. If you once start the habit of exercise, and couple with it the habit of laughter, even if only for one short week, you'll keep it up ever afterwards. And by the way, friend reader, don't be alarmed. The personal pronouns I and you give place in succeeding chapters to the more congenial editorial we. I couldn't resist the temptation to enjoy one brief spell of intimacy just for the sake of good acquaintance. Have a laugh on me. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2. Taking stock of ourselves. Experience is the real teacher, but the matter of how we are going to succeed in life should not be left to ordinary chance while we are waiting for things to happen. Our first duty is to prepare ourselves against untoward experiences, and that is best done by taking stock of our mental and physical assets at the very outset of our journey. What weaknesses we possess are excess baggage to be thrown away, and that is our reason for taking stock so early. It is likely to save us from riding to a fall. There is one thing we don't want along: fear. We will never get anywhere with that, nor with any of its uncles, aunts, or cousins. Envy, malice, and greed. In justice to our own best interests, we should search every crook and cranny of our hearts and minds lest we venture forth with any such impedimenta. There is no excuse, and we have no one to blame if we allow any of them to journey along with us. We know whether they are there or not, just as we would know courage, trust, and honor were they perched behind us on the saddle. It is idle to squeal if, through association with the former, we find ourselves ditched before we are well under way. For it is coming to us, sooner or later. We might go far, as some have done, through the lanes and alleys of ill-gotten gains and luxurious self-indulgence, but we would pay in the end. So, why not charge them up to profit and loss at the start and kick them off into the gutter where they belong? They are not for us on our eventful journey through life, and the time to get rid of them once and for all is when we are young and mentally and physically vigorous. Later on, when the fires burn low and we still have them with us, they will be hard to push aside. To thine own self be true, says the great Shakespeare, and how can we be true to our own selves if we train with inferiors? We are known by our companionships. We will be rated according to association, good or bad. The two will not mix for long, and we will be one sort of a fellow or the other. We can't be both. There was a time long years ago, in the days of our grandfathers, when men went to the bow wows and later on came back as it were by making a partial success in life, measured largely by the money they succeeded in accumulating. That was before the checkup system was invented. Today things are different. Questions are asked. Where were you last? Why did you leave there? Have you credentials? And when we shake our weary head and walk away, we fondly wish we had taken stock back there when the taking was good. To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. When we analyze ourselves and find that we are living up to the quoted lines above, we may safely lift the limit from our aspirations. Right here it is well to say that success is not to be computed in dollars and cents, nor that the will to achieve a successful life is to be predicated upon the mere accumulation of wealth. First of all, good health and good minds. Then we may laugh long and loud. We're safe on first. So, with these two weapons we may dig down into our aspirations, and, keeping in view that our policy is that of honesty to ourselves and toward our fellow man, all we need to do is to go about the program of life cheerfully and stout of heart. For now we are in a state of preparedness. We are at the point where vision starts. Along with this vision must come the courage of convictions in order that we may feel that our ideas are important. And because we have such thoughts, we shall surely succeed. It has often been noticed that when we have had a large conception and have with force, character, and strength of will carried it into effect, immediately thereafter a host of people have been able to say, "I thought of that myself." Most of us have had the same experience after reading of a great discovery that we had thrown overboard because it must not have been worth while, or someone else would already have thought of it. The man who puts life into an idea is acclaimed a genius because he does the right thing at the right time. Therein lies the difference between the genius and a commonplace man. We all have ambitions, but only the few achieve. A man thinks of a good thing and says, "Now, if I only had the money, I'd put that through." The word "if" was a dent in his courage. With character fully established, his plan well thought out, he had only to go to those in command of capital, and it would have been forthcoming. He had something that capital would cheerfully get behind if he had the courage to back up his claims. To fail was nothing less than moral cowardice. The will to do had not been efficient. There was a flaw in the character, after all. Going back, therefore, to the prescription, we find that a sound body, a good mind, an honest purpose, and a lack of fear are the essential elements of success. So, when we have conceived something for the good of the world, and have allowed it to go by default, we have dropped the monkey wrench into the machinery of our preparedness. We must look about us for a reason. Have we fallen by the wayside of carelessness? Have we allowed ourselves to be discouraged by cowardly ifs? Did we lack the sand? Exactly so. We didn't have the courage of our convictions. Life is the one great experience, and those who fail to win, if sound of body, can safely lay the blame to their lack of mental equipment. What does it matter if disappointments follow one after the other, if we can laugh and try again? Failures must come to all of us in some degree, but we may rise from our failures and win back our losses if we are only shrewd enough to realize that good health, sound mind, and a cheerful spirit are necessary adjuncts. As Tennyson says, "I held a truth with him who sings to one clear harp in divers tones, that men may rise on stepping stones of their dead selves to higher things." All truly great men have been healthy, otherwise they would have fallen short of the mark. Prisons are filled with nervous, diseased creatures. There is no doubt but that most of these who, through ignorance, sifted through to the bottomless pits, could have saved themselves had they realized the truth and taken stock of themselves in time, of course allowing for those who are victims of circumstantial evidence. The prime necessity of life is health. With this, for mankind, nothing is impossible. But if we do not make use of this good health, it will waste itself away and never come back. It often disappears entirely for lack of interest on the part of its thoughtless owner. A little energy would have saved the day. A little pep, and we laugh and live. Laughter clings to good health as naturally as the needle clings to the magnet. It is the outward expression of an unburdened soul. It bubbles forth as a fountain, always refreshing, always wholesome and sweet. In taking stock of ourselves, we should not forget that fear plays a large part in the drama of failure. That is the first thing to be dropped. Fear is a mental deficiency susceptible of correction if taken in hand before it gains an ascendancy over us. Fear comes with the thought of failure. Everything we think about should have the possibility of success in it if we are going to build up courage. We should get into the habit of reading inspirational books, looking at inspirational pictures, hearing inspirational music, associating with inspirational friends, and above all, we should cultivate the habit of mind of thinking clean and of doing wholesome things. Guard thyself. That is the slogan. Let us take stock often and see where we stand. We will not be afraid of the weak points. We will get after them and get hold of ourselves at the same time. Some book might give us help. A fine play or some form of athletics will start us to thinking. Self-analysis teaches us to see ourselves in a true light without embellishments or undue optimism. We can gauge our chances in no better way. If we grope in the darkness, we haven't much of a chance. Taking stock throws a searchlight on the dark spots and points the way out of the danger zone. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Advantages of an early start. It is the young man who has the best chance of winning. Then why shouldn't youthfulness be made a permanent asset? We have recovered from the idea of putting a man into a sanatorium just because a few gray hairs show themselves in his head. We should not ask him how old he is. We should ask, what can he do? The young man may have the advantage of years, but the older one has the advantage of experience and knowledge. Now, if this older man could carry along with him that spirit of youth which actuated his earlier activities, he would be prepared against incapacity. Our fate hangs on how we conduct ourselves in youth. The world has great need of the sober, thoughtful men above the 50 line. By right of experience and knowledge, they should become our leaders in the shaping of our policies. It is all a matter of how a man comes through mentally, physically, and spiritually. Age should not count against him. The first thought is to keep healthy. In fact, we cannot harp on this too much. The second requirement is confidence in ourselves, without which our career is short-lived. Already we perceive that one must keep track of his inner self. This breeds confidence. The very fact that one stops to probe into that hidden land of thought shows that he is keeping tab on himself with a sharp eye. That's the stuff. We mustn't fool ourselves. The majority of failures come as a result of not being able to trust oneself. The moment we doubt or acknowledge that we cannot conquer a weakness, then we begin to go downhill. It is a subtle process. We hardly realize it at the time, but as the days go by, the years roll on, the final day of reckoning draws near, and relentlessly we are swept along as driftwood toward the lonely beaches of obscurity. And all because we lacked self-confidence. We did not realize it until it was too late. We were too busy with self-indulgence to struggle for success. Most of our troubles in later life started with failure to take hold of ourselves when we were young. It may be that we put off making our choice of something to do. If we had been companionable to ourselves, We might have thought out the proper course while taking long walks in pursuit of physical development. That would have been a fine time in which to fight out the whole problem, the time when optimism and the will to do are as natural as the laughter of a child or the song of a bird. That was the time when the world appeared roseate and beautiful, when success lay just beyond the turn of the road, when failure seemed something illusory and improbable. Then was the time to jump in with both feet and a big hearty laugh to solve the problem of what to do and how to go about it. It is surprising how readily the world follows the individual with confidence. It is willing to believe in him, to furnish funds, to assist in any way within its power. And that is where the man with a smile is sure to win, for the man who smiles has confidence in himself. So long as we carry along with us our atmosphere of hearty goodwill and enthusiasm, we know no defeat. The man who is gloomy, taciturn, and lives in a world of doubt seldom achieves more than a bare living. There have been a few who have groaned their way through a competence, but in proportion to that overwhelming number of souls who carry cheer through life they are as nothing, mere drops in the bucket. If the truth were told, their success came probably through mere chance and nothing else. Such people are not the ones for us to endeavor to follow. We cannot afford to allow our visions to sour. Beginning early takes away timidity and builds for success while we are young enough to enjoy the benefits. Although it is never too late to start a cheerful life, we don't have to kill ourselves in the attempt. There is no necessity for throwing all caution to the winds, but we should press our advantages. With self-analysis comes a certain poise, a certain dignity and kindliness that tempers every move with precision. Once we get to the proper start, we have only to take stock now and then in order to keep our machinery in a fine state of repair. If we have chosen wisely, we love our work and stick to it closely, not forgetting the home duties and our share in its success. Right here we run up against the danger signal if our business success wins us away from the hearthstone. Love of home is a quality of the workers of the earth. What doth it profit a man to win the whole world if he loseth his own soul? To sum up the case, once we have made up our minds to win and how we are going to do it, the next step is to act. Health is synonymous with action. The healthy man does things. The unhealthy man hesitates. And when we get ready to act, we will act with the air of a conqueror. We must supply from our own store our atmosphere of confidence in order to win confidence. The successful man is the one who knows he is right and makes us realize it. It is always worthwhile to study the successes among our acquaintances. Are they gloomy, morose, and irritable? If they were to that extent, they would not be successful. On the contrary, they are robust, confident individuals who have taken advantage of every rightful opportunity and possess the power to smile when all about them were in the dumps. When everyone else thought that there wasn't a chance to win, these fellows stepped in and took charge. When we interview the failures, we find that all of them give one excuse: I didn't have the confidence. They might not say it in exactly these words, but the meaning is plain. They ran through the whole gamut of self-distrust which is the natural result of not having started early in the study of self, the serious realization of their own capabilities. This makes it easy to understand their plight. If we know ourselves, we are strengthened that much because we can bolster up our weaknesses. We will know enough to combat timidity. We can then know what we are capable of and thus become conscious of our innate powers that only need to be called into action in order to become useful. We cannot imagine for an instant a great violinist going out on the concert platform in ignorance of the condition of his instrument. And yet failures go out on the stage of life knowing nothing of their strengths and weaknesses, and still expect to win. If we are to become successes, we must Keep success in mind. Banish all thought of losing. Success is just as natural as anything else. It is only a matter of the mind anyhow. We are all successes as long as we continue to think so. Self-depreciation is a disease. Once it gets hold on us, goodbye. And that is why it is wise to begin early, to take hold of affairs while we are young. Superiority over our fellow man comes from a superiority of mind and body. A healthy mind breeds a healthy body. The most superficial study will convince us of this fact. Appearance counts for much in this world. We judge largely by appearances. We haven't time to know everyone we meet intimately, and as a result must base our opinions upon first impressions. The fellow who comes in an office with his head hanging down between his shoulders and a frown upon his face doesn't get far with us. We find ourselves looking over his sagging shoulders toward the individual behind him, who comes in with a swinging step and the confidence born of health and good spirits. Self-confidence in youth makes for self-confidence in after years. This is far from meaning that one can be brazen and inclined towards freshness and get away with it. It merely means the marshalling of one's forces, the command of one's self, and the ability to make others recognize that we are on the map because we belong there. And one of the quickest ways to accomplish this is to have a smile tucked away for instant use. Again, this does not mean that we are to carry round a ready-to-wear grin, which we wear only as we are ushered into the presence of another. A real smile or a hearty laugh is not to be counterfeited. We easily know the genuine from the spurious. A real laugh springs naturally out of a pure, unadulterated confidence and a good physical condition. What triumphs, what splendid battles have been won through the ability to laugh at the right moment. Whenever we find that we are losing our ability to smile, let's have no false notions. We are neglecting our physical well-being. Let us then and there drop the somber thoughts and get out into the open air. Run down the street and, if possible, out into the country. If we see a tree and have the inclination to climb it, well, then climb it. If we are sensitive about what our neighbors might say, too bad. But we can romp with easy grace. If we but knew how gladly our neighbors would emulate our gymnastics, if they knew the value of them, the laugh would be on us for dreading their opinion. One thing we do know, they will envy us our good health and spirits. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Profiting by Experience. Experience comes by contact. There is no way we can have experiences without passing directly through them. If we are up and doing, they come thick and fast into our lives. Some of them weighted down by the peculiar twists and turns of circumstances, others simple, easily understood, and still others complicated to the point of not being understood at all. People are divided into two classes: those who profit by experience and those who do not. The unfortunate part of it all is that the latter class is by far the larger of the two. The man of vigorous purpose, fine constitution, and the full knowledge of self sees through an experience as clearly as through a window. The glass may be foggy, but he knows what lies beyond. Self-reliant and strong, he seeks knowledge through experience, while the weak man, the unhealthy-minded, the inefficient, stands aside and gives him the right of way. In later years, however, they bitterly complain that they were not given the same chance to succeed. The man of experience, having long since passed through the stages of indecision, has, through careful self-analysis, learned to bridge difficulties that would make others tremble with fear. He knows that every lane has a turning. He may not see it at the moment. He may not know where it is. But that doesn't worry him. He picks up his bundle and trudges ahead, confident that victory awaits him somewhere along the line. The fact that he believes in himself sets him apart from ordinary mankind. Many great men have been at a loss to understand why they attained success. It is well nigh impossible for them to outline the causes that led them to the top rungs of the ladder. The reason is that their lack of fear of experiences was an unconscious one rather than a conscious one. However, they are willing to admit that, acting on the principle of profiting by experience, loaned them initiative with which to proceed. They soon came to know opportunity at sight, and had only to look around to find it. The young man standing on the threshold of life is, from lack of experience, puzzled over the future. He looks above him and sees the towering successes. He reads in the papers of the massive characters who have risen from the bottom to the top. Naturally, he would like to meet one of these giants of success and hear what he has to say. The interview is quite needless. Get busy and profit by experience is about all the advice one man can give to another. There is no way to profit by experience until we have had experience, so there is nothing to do but get busy, and experience will come as fast as we can absorb it. Our duty is to strive for success and not expect to attain it except by successive steps. A wholesome consignment would be our undoing. Quick successes through luck or good fortune have not the lasting value of those won by virtue of knowing how, of accomplishing what we started out to do. Faith in oneself does not come from the outside. It must spring up naturally from within. A healthy body and a sane mind are the best foundations for this. The young man who begins his career with these facts in mind is given a running start over his competitors. Poverty and failure are the result of an ignorance of the value of experience. Worry, anxiety, fear of not doing the right thing, lack of insight into character. These, too, are the result of a lack of experience. Good health is necessary to experience, but a majority neglect to take care of it. If we are to profit by what we learn, we must have the vim with which to push forward. We must have every ounce of vitality we possess at command, ready for use. This we conserve for the big emergency which we know is coming. New experiences are pushing us forward, and previous experiences are helping to move the load. Experience tells us what to do at this point and that, and at last puts its shoulder to the wheel, and over she goes. Every mind is in possession of an enormous amount of dormant power, and only experience can release it into proper action. We often hear a fond mother say that her son is full to bursting with the old Nick, which means that the youngster is overflowing with pent-up energy. With experience, he could find good use for it, but without it this surplus may turn out to be a dangerous possession. Young men of this type should be guarded most carefully and advised to get busy early in life at something worthwhile. Many a bright fellow, brimming with excess power, has gone as a lamb to the slaughter into the maelstrom of vice because of being held back for legitimate occupation. He just had to blow off steam, so he did it in a gin mill rather than a rolling mill. This dynamo called the mind can be trained to do anything. Not only can it be guided at the start, but it can be guided by all that follows. It can be used for building additional dynamos to be called into action in times of need. This statement may seem at first far-fetched. If we think so, it is proof that we have not profited by our experiences and should get down to stock-taking before it is too late. The practical man, after all, is only one who takes advantage of opportunities. He could double and triple his power if he only realized how superficial the average setback really is. The young man has just as much chance of being considered practical as the so-called older one, always provided that he has a store of experiences to profit by. The first big experience of life usually makes or breaks us. For this experience we need to be prepared. We must have a strong heart that we may bear defeat nobly from this not to be our last kick, our last breath, not by a jugful. We are going to start all over again after our setback, and we are not going to wait any longer than it takes to bury the dead. This will be done decently and in good order. Our training will admit of no indecorum. If the smash was a bad one, we will assume the liability nevertheless and get back on the job. We are out to win, and eventually we will win. And that is what we mean by taking profit from experience. The powers that break down are also the powers that build up. The electrician who handles the motor could just as well end his own existence by that mysterious current as he could make use of it for the good of humanity. He spends years of conscientious study and masters the knowledge of it so that its uses are as simple as his ABCs. There is no doubt in the world but that he had to learn by experience. He had to go into the shop and climb up from the bottom. There was no other way by which he could come to know how to turn a deadly force into a well-trained necessity. Yet the average man goes into life with as little knowledge of its forces as the baby who puts its foot upon the third rail. That fact keeps the thoughtless man down until experience comes to the rescue. When it does come, if he has the sand, the common sense, the will to do, there is naught to hold him away from his goal. End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Energy, Success, and Laughter. There are many essentials to success, but there is one that is of such importance that without it all the others become as naught. The man who wins success is invariably impelled to do the great work allotted him by something within that tells him he can. He may not know exactly what it is, but he knows he possesses it and is able to act on that faith, accomplishing things which seem utterly impossible to other people. This inner determination, once firmly implanted in one's nature, cannot be destroyed or conquered, and this element is energy. Energy of mind which rules the body. But where does this come from? How do the great minds generate this glorious means of self-propulsion? The answer is that in a healthy body it is inherent from birth, and proper care of the body therefore accentuates within their minds the will to do. If the preceding chapters have been carefully read, we may readily believe that the successful youth must start with a wholesome, generous viewpoint, a good constitution, and a clean mind. We have had an inkling by this time of what one must do to achieve success in a world where competition is keen. We are beginning to realize that these matters are of vital importance and that we are face to face with a problem. Energy is the natural outpouring of a healthy body. It must be directed, it must be controlled, the same as any other living force. Not only is it a positive necessity to the winner, but it must grow and become a natural quality. It does not stand after years of abuse. It does not spring up in the night after a long season of neglect and ill health. All of us possess it in varying ways. That fact ought to convince us that we can get hold of ourselves and build up that which nature has given us rather than allow it to die away. We all have a certain amount of energy. Why shouldn't we all be successes? We might to a certain extent, but that doesn't mean that we shall all get rich in the money sense of the word. When we say, why shouldn't we all be successes, we do not mean that everybody in the world must be greedy for money, nor for power and position. It does not mean that we should be selfish and eager to take everything away from the other fellow. On the contrary, it means that, with energy, we shall be successful according to our brain tendency. Going back to our second chapter, we find the phrase taking stock of ourselves. Done rightly, that alone will inspire success. Now, if we are a little farther along on the way towards sane living and the ability to laugh, and we know that after this struggle is over, the battle is won, we must use the powers that self-analysis gives us to fight. The mere recognition of them is power, and we must not let them go to waste. Energy is like steam. It cannot be generated under the boiling point. In other words, half-heartedness never produced it nor made it a practical working tool. We must be energetic in order to augment energy. We must have confidence along with it, the more the merrier. The greater the confidence in ourselves, the greater the energy which brought it about. Some minds naturally feel confident. These are the lucky ones, the slender few who have grasped life's meaning at the start by taking stock before they were threatened with defeat. Success comes to them as easily as rolling off the proverbial log. They come sweeping along, conquering, sure of themselves, confident, aspiring, true to their inner selves, ready for work, unafraid of experiences, and sure of a smile when the clouds are darkest. This does not mean that these successes have exceptional ability. If that were the case, we would not waste time either in reading or writing about the matter. If we didn't feel that we were potentially able to become successes and possess the elements of victory in our present make-up, not another moment would be spent on the subject. The very simplicity of this use of energy proves to us that it is a quality bubbling forth in the least of us and the strongest. It only needs to be put to work and it becomes self-strengthening. Living in the open air, sleeping out of doors, taking the proper exercise, looking wholesomely upon life, believing in ourselves, are all parts of the sane existence which leads to success and laughter. We ought to feel that everything in life possesses elements akin to human feeling. We should not arrogate to ourselves the sole right to rule and reason. And what has this to do with energy? It is only one of the many vistas that open to us when we learn how to laugh and live. And man alive, if we never learn to laugh, we will never learn to live. We must not forget that there can be more than one use made of energy. In the same way that electricity might be misused, so might energy be placed in the wrong service. We must not waste any time, therefore, in getting this energy of ours worked into enthusiasm. Enthusiasm for our life work, for our fellow man, for the zest of life. We must throw ourselves into the battle and carry the standard. We must leap to the front, not waiting for the other fellow to show the way. Spend your enthusiasm freely and be surprised at how it thrives on usage. Enthusiasm, being produced by energy, must of a necessity depend largely upon that. Now the point is, how shall we guard and keep fresh this element in ourselves? We know that the body is producing this quality. Like the steam engine, we are keeping the fires going by exercise, wholesome thinking, and sincerity of purpose. We are the engineers. Our hand is on the throttle. Sharp turns lie ahead, but our eyes look forward fearlessly. We glance about us to see that we are in the pink of condition. We know that our mind is functioning properly and that the awakened confidence is already inherent in our natures and stands beside us night and day like the officer upon the bridge of a ship. Indeed, we are on our way. Out of energy and enthusiasm comes something else that must not be neglected. In fact, it must be cultivated and guarded from the very beginning. Laughter. The mere possession of energy and enthusiasm makes us feel like laughing. We want to leap and jump and dance and sing. If we feel like that, don't let us be afraid to do it. Get out in the air and run like a schoolboy. Jump ditches, vault fences, swing the arms. Never fail to get next to nature when responsive to the call. Indeed, we may woo this call from within ourselves until it comes to be second nature. And when we rise in the morning, let us be determined that we will start the day with a hearty laugh anyhow. Laugh because you are alive. Laugh with everything. Let yourself go. That is the secret, the ability to let one's self go. If we follow this religiously, we will be surprised how successful the day will be. Everything gives way before it. End of chapter 5. Recording by Tom Weiss, tomsaudiobooks.com. Six through 10 of Laugh and Live by Douglas Fairbanks. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Tom Weiss. Chapter 6. Building Up a Personality. More and more, personality is coming into its own as man's greatest asset. There was never a day when it was not, but in former years this essential quality was not listed under the name personality. Had we lived in the days of our fathers' youth, we would have heard about remarkable men, men of big caliber, large character, splendid presence, and the like. But it remained for our day and generation to discover the real word, personality, meaning the most perfect combination possible of man's highest attributes. At least, that would be the definition in its fullest sense. Of course, everyone has a certain personality, and, no matter in what degree, its possession is valuable. Personality is an acorn, so to speak, which may be cultivated into a sturdy oak. Personality is one's inner self, outwardly expressed. It represents the conquest of our weaknesses, and naturally impresses our strength of character upon others. With personality, our foundation is firm. On this pedestal we may stand squarely and face life with equanimity. For such there is no end to achievement while good health and youthful spirit remain. It is impossible to come into the presence of a personality without becoming immediately aware of it. It is reflected by people of small stature, poor physiques, homely visages, as well as men of the highest physical development. The great Napoleon was just above 5 feet, while Lincoln towered over the 6-foot line. Men of personality are the last to say die. Their store of combativeness carries them beyond their real span of existence either in years or achievement. Thus the mind shows its mastery over matter. Alexander Pope was still writing while propped up upon the pillows of his deathbed. Mark Twain joked with friends when he knew his hour was at hand. Personality is magnetic. It can charm the friend or put fear into the heart of the enemy. Joan of Arc, a frail woman, won battles at the head of her troops. History is filled with incidents where men of personality have turned defeat into victory by leading their soldiers back into the fray. Wholesome personality is the fulfillment of self-development, physically, mentally, and spiritually. But all personality is not wholesome, for it often shows in the face of a man who is a rogue at heart. Therefore, all personality is not for the good of the world. It is only of the wholesome kind that we speak. To such as possess it, the goal is divine. Personality could never be perfected without living a life of preparedness backed up by our most earnest and honest convictions. Personality is made up of many qualities, and differs in man only as man is different from his brother man. Perfect personality requires constant care in its development and constant guard for its safety. It cannot be purchased in the open market. It must be built upon piece by piece, and everything we are becomes a part of it. Personality would be indeed imperfect if it did not give us full poise. If we neglect our physical poise, we pull down our mental poise, likewise our spiritual poise. That is why personality must be kept constantly protected against encroachment. But this can be so fixed by purpose, plan, and power of will that it becomes automatically safeguarded. Once in possession, we have only to make it part of our natural selves and wear it unconsciously to the last breath of life. Then the question is, why should we allow ourselves to be satisfied with an imperfect personality? It only reflects back upon ourselves. Haven't we often heard a man say, "He is all right, but..." Perhaps the personality in question was untidy, or that his walk was that of a laggard, or that he affected an egotistical air of superiority. Whatever the impairment, it should have been done away with. A man of personality should never be haunted with worry from the sneers of his inferiors because of their own laxity. Some men perfect their manner of speech to a degree which takes it above that of their weaker fellows. Others develop fine qualities which are viewed by ordinary individuals as affectations but which are in reality the result of innate refinement. The man of no refinement has indeed an uphill fight, but with persistence and ambition to succeed he can win. Lincoln, the rail splitter, is the most shining example of the power to will victory. For him to have fallen by the wayside would have caused no comment, for it would have been expected in those early days of struggle. But to those who have the benefit of inherited tendencies toward personality, to fail in its development is in the nature of a crime. Personality does not mean over-refinement. Sturdy qualities are the necessary ones. Over-refinement leads to the softer life and ofttimes to degeneracy. Exalted ego is an indication of degeneracy and may have been inherited. Of those things we inherit that are good we must hold, and everlastingly must we watch those which are bad. It is never wise to wander far away from basic principles in depreachment. What we need is guidance along the road to the goal of personality. First of all, we need health, and second, the will to do. Next, we must use these weapons in the right direction, for personality is at its zenith when backed up by strong physique and brain power. From previous chapters we have learned that success of any kind is predicated upon keeping ourselves in trim and in good humor. Keeping in trim is no trick at all. We can make it a part of every physical action, and as keeping in trim means perfection of body and soundness of mind, we should never neglect to utilize any effort that will help us toward bodily efficiency. There is exercise in stooping over to pick up a pin if we will go about it in the right way. We can correct an ill-formed body by adopting and maintaining a certain carriage. We may hold our chin in such a way as to provide against stooped shoulders. We have opportunities both morning and evening to indulge in various forms of light, systematic exercises which will push forward the day's work with zest and vim. Poise has everything to do with personality. Therefore, the physical structure must come in for its share of proper attention. No man of refined personality would walk the streets with a soiled face or uncombed hair. Such things do not give poise. They are the evidences of a laggard spirit. The more we exercise, the more energetic we become, the surer we are of ourselves, the farther we get in the development of our personality. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7. Honesty, the character builder. Just as the straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, so is honesty the only proper attitude of one person toward another. Without it there is no understanding possible. It must always remain supreme as a quality without which character becomes a sham, a superficial thing that has no basis in fact. The ability to look the other fellow in the eye is as necessary to character as the foundation is to a house. It comes out of that great within which we are now exploring. It arises from the courageous facing of our weaknesses and becomes a part of the man who knows himself and laughs with life at the mere joy of living, doing, accomplishing, winning against all odds. Honesty accompanies a proper self-esteem, and its cultivation should become a part of our earliest education. It doesn't grow anywhere except within ourselves and will never be handed to us on a silver platter. If we fail to find it when we are young, it will have small chance of obtaining a grip on us later. It is the one quality with which to crown our highest attributes. It is final proof that we are capable of just thought and square dealing, and is proof positive that we are part and parcel of the wholesome spirit which rules the universe. Its possession is greater than riches, for its dividend is happiness and contentment, and we cannot go wrong if we so live that we can look any man in the eye and tell him the truth. To live in the full sense means to be alert. Whatever high moral plane we shall achieve must be held against all temptation. There is no compromise. Self-deceit is nothing less than self-stultification. We only fool ourselves and soon find ourselves slipping downhill. It will be hard climbing getting back. And what of the wear and tear on our ambitions meanwhile? Honesty doesn't grow naturally out of a dull, uninspired life. It goes with the energetic, the forceful. The dull soul who is content to plod along, year after year, in the same rut may be honest, and this one redeeming feature may be of such inestimable value to him that it sweetens and softens his entire days. It will bring him friends, true blue friends, who will excuse all other shortcomings because of his honesty. It gives him the unadulterated trust of his employer, and it arouses a certain admiration among his narrow circle of acquaintances. If this is true with the dullard, the weakling, then what must it mean when possessed by the great? We know, for instance, how the nation instinctively turned to General Washington when it came to choosing their president after the Revolutionary War. He may have been gifted, he may have been one of the world's greatest captains, but the one quality which endeared him to his countrymen was a tremendous moral superiority. He never told a lie, rang around the world. Summed up, his virtues amounted to those 5 words. Some statesmen may have been more astute, but Washington was honest. He never told a lie. The people knew they could trust this man, so they elected him to fill the highest place within their gift. Honesty within ourselves is the first thing to remember. Unless we are, it will be impossible for us to enter into that spiritual contentment enjoyed by those who are honest with themselves. If we are untrue to ourselves, how can we be true to others? The framework of a man's moral being must be that of honesty. It must become his very nature and become automatic in its processes. It belongs to the healthy, those who keep themselves well through vigorous exercise and temperate living. It is not a quality set aside for the lucky few. Every man, woman, and child possesses it in some degree, and only its constant neglect trims it to a minimum. It is one of those fundamentals of life, one of those powerful and moving forces that rule society. We are either honest or we are not. We cannot be nearly honest and get away with it. When one stops to consider honesty, even for a moment, its full importance is realized. For example, imagine having a dishonest friend. Could we go to him with the secrets of our heart? Could we trust him? Would we trust anyone who might turn traitor? Again, suppose we were untrue to ourselves and the fact became known. Could we blame others if they passed us up as a companion? Never in 1,000 years. We must sleep in the beds we prepare for ourselves. Men have grown accustomed through the years to certain standards. These are now the moral laws which control and guide the destinies of entire races, whole generations. There must have been a good reason for these laws, or they could never have come into being. Society does not adopt many unnecessary rules, but among the vital laws, honesty stands out in bold relief. It has become deeply embedded in the minds of mankind that everyone must be true to himself. It is taken for granted that those who are not would naturally be false to everybody. The reason for this lies in the fact that society will not proceed with any course of action without being able to trust its members. The general in charge of an army would have a hard time of it if he were unable to place faith in the subordinate to whom he gave instructions that might lead to a crisis in the battle. Society would dash itself upon the rocks were it not conscious that certain people are courageously honest, and in these it finds its leaders. To rise in life means that our fellow man believes in us and wishes us to do so. Without his cooperation, it would be futile to arouse our own ambitions. We could not hope to win a victory all alone and against the great majority who believe in certain standards and conditions. We might fool ourselves into thinking that because of some stroke of fortune we had established an immunity for ourselves, but some day our consciences would tell us how feebly we had succeeded. There is only one method, only one way. Rise through honesty and an optimistic belief in self. And let us not plume ourselves because of our virtue. Personal honesty is our due to ourselves and our fellow man. One of the distinctive elements in the honest man's make-up is that of laughter. The ones who live up to their ideals do not feel that life is such a dark place after all. It may mean hard work, little play, and often delayed rewards, but the fact that there is a world and that it is filled with other honest souls is reward enough to give us courage to laugh as we go along. We can always afford to laugh when we're honest. The man who is innately honest has no reason to fear the snares of fortune. He knows that he can win the trust of men. He knows that he already has it. He has no dread of looking into the other fellow's eye. He knows where he stands in life. He has won that which he has through struggle, and he does not intend to lose it. He does not intend to fail. He cannot fail. He cannot lose. No matter how things might go at this moment or that, the next will find him on the rising tide of new opportunities, new chances. His reputation travels before him like the advance agent. His coming is heralded, and he is welcomed into any community. It isn't as though there were only a few honest men. This welcome, this glad hand, is always extended by society to the honest man as a token of approval. The world's work is a tremendous matter. There is always room for another worker to handle some part of it. And only the true, the sincere, are capable of doing this in the proper way. The leaders of society in the broader sense are those who win the faith of the average man. We look up to Lincoln because we know that he was the one man in a million to accomplish the greatest task ever set before a human being. We realize that he was honest. Honest in the huge sense so necessary to the accomplishment of big ideals. And we know that in order to win some part of that great trust, we must obey the standards of honesty and decency that lie below the surface and only need to be called to life and action in order to be used. And laughter will arouse that sense as quickly as anything else. The man who is capable of laughing heartily is not apt to be the one who carries some conscience-stricken thought around with him. It's the easiest thing in the world to detect an untrue laugh. The real laugh springs out of the depths of being and comes with a ringing sense of security and faith in oneself. It goes with the workman in the early morning when he swings along the road to the factory. It accompanies the soldier into battle. It arouses the clerk from lethargy. It brightens the sick room. It raises us all to unexplored heights, and as evidence of our state of mind it can mean only one thing: honesty and sincerity. No character can exist without this outward exhibition of an inward honesty. The mere cultivation of laughter would eventually lead to honesty. The fact that you are laughing, enjoying life, awakens you to a spirit of security and a feeling of the joy of living. Gloomy men are the ones whose tendency is toward crime and trouble. Laughing men are the ones who stir the world with new desires and make life worth living. Therefore we say, laugh and live. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8. Cleanliness of Body and Mind. If we interview many of life's failures, we will find that the overwhelming majority went down because of their neglect to get out of an environment that was not stimulating and because their ambitions had grown rusty and inefficient to cope with depressing circumstances. The prisons and other institutions are filled with people who did not make any attempt to get away from the vicious surroundings in which they lived. They were like tadpoles that had never grown to frogs. They just kept swimming around in their muddy puddles, and, not having grown legs with which they could leap out onto the banks and away to other climes, they continued to swim in monotonous circles until they died. In other words, the failure is a man who dwells in muddy atmosphere all his days, who is content to remain a tadpole, and who never attempts to take advantage of any opportunity. He becomes unclean, so to speak. And that is what we mean by this chapter heading, Cleanliness of Body and Mind. It was not intended to point out the proper way to keep our faces and hands clean, or as a sermon, but rather to show ourselves that the clean body begets the clean mind, the two together constituting compelling tendencies toward the clean spirit. A move in the direction of these takes us out of the rut of life. No matter what cause we dig up with which to explain our success in life, we cannot neglect this one important one, the careful selection of our acquaintances. And this doesn't mean that one must be a snob. Far from it. It only means that the successful man, the man who wishes to rise in life, should not spend his days in the company of illiterate companions who do not possess ambition of heart or the will to do the work of the world. It means that life is too short to hang around the loafing places with the driftwood of humanity, listening to their stories of failure and drinking in with liquor some of their bitterness against those who have toiled and won the fruits of their toil. It means that we will not go out of our way to seek the friendship of men and women who are simply endeavoring to gain happiness in life without paying for it. It means that we will do all in our power to win friends who aspire nobly and by so doing inspire those with whom they come in contact. Such men are naturally clean of mind and body. We must remember always to live in a world of clear thought that will stimulate our ambitions. Dwelling in the dark corners of life and traveling with the debris of humanity will not arouse us to action and give us that swinging vigor of heart and mind so necessary to the accomplishment of great things. While we will ever lend the helping hand to those who need it, we will naturally associate with those who have vim and courage. We will not be dragged down by our associates. Until we meet the right kind, we will hold aloof, and we will not be morose and gloomy because it happens that at this moment our acquaintanceship does not include these successes. When we have succeeded in doing something big, they will come to us, and if we think big things, we are likely to do them. It is all a matter of the will to do. Nothing succeeds like success, said some very wise man, and if there ever was a phrase that rang with truth, this does. It means that the thought of success, the courage that comes with success, leads to more and more success. It means that the thinker of these thoughts is living in a clean, wholesome atmosphere, along with those who are determined and in earnest. It means that they have caught the fervor of true life, a healthy, contagious fervor which permeates the blood swiftly once it gets a hold, and like electricity it vivifies and stirs the spirit with renewed energy day after day, year after year. Once it wins us, it will stick with us. The success of those about us will shake our lethargic limbs and stimulate us to a desire to do as they do. We will be in a world of clean thought and action, and our lives will mirror their lives. Our thoughts will be filled with wholesome things and with good health. We will win in spite of all obstacles. Cleanliness is the morale of the body and the mind. The man who is careful of his linen and who does not neglect his morning plunge is not apt to be gloomy and morose. We noticed him in the car or on the street in the morning. He comes striding along, fresh and full of the zest of living. His mind is clear and unclouded. His eyes are full of that vigorous light of conscientious desire to win and do so honestly. He has none of the hypocritical elements in his nature strong enough to rule him. There may be, and probably are, many weaknesses in his character. His very strength consists in his ability to crush them and make them his slaves. The man who has taken his morning plunge and dressed himself agreeable to comfort and grace has his battles of the day won in advance. He knows the value of keeping himself in trim. He does it for the sake of his own feelings. Our approval of his appearance goes without saying. If a man thinks well of himself in matters of appearance, his general deportment is likely to coincide. Such men never overdo. They are at ease with themselves, and thus impart ease to others who come in contact with them. They have, in other words, a distinction of their own, and their distinction is their power. They know that the highest moral law of nature is that of cleanliness, that filthiness should not be allowed to dominate any man's ethics or physical condition. They rule such things out of their lives. A vast magnetic force comes out of those friends of ours who are doing things and making the world sit up and take notice. The mere fact that we live near to them, know them, and associate with them is proof positive that we, too, shall go through life with clean minds and bodies. They would not tolerate us if we were to slip into shoddy ways. Nothing is revealed quicker to our intimates than the losing of ambition, the slipping into careless habits. We cannot conceal it from them. We fool only those who brush by. The loss of this self-respect has a terrible effect upon the system, and every tendency toward success is thereby stunted and weakened. We have fallen into unclean ways. It would not be long before we sink to the bottom, or else remain among the vast crowd who have neither the courage to fall nor the courage to rise. Nothing produces failure quicker than filthiness of mind and body. Those who are successful keep away from the very thought of such a condition. They live as much as possible in the open. They take morning and evening exercises. They read good books, attend good plays, and are continually in touch with the finer developments of thought and art in the world. Their faces are open and full of sunlight. They are determined that life will not beat them in a game that only requires sureness of aim and the ability to take advantage of the 1,001 opportunities that surround them on every side. Cleanliness stands paramount in its importance to success. Perhaps no other one thing has so vital a hold upon the individual who succeeds. The general of an army first looks to the morale of his troops. He knows that with clean minds and bodies his soldiers are capable of doing big things. The battleship, that efficient and highly developed instrument of war, is so immaculate that one could eat his meals on its very decks. Its officers are wholesome, athletic fellows. Its crew consists of hardy men who live sanely and vigorously and who have plenty to occupy their minds. And if cleanliness is fundamental in their case, why not in our own? When we come to analyze ourselves, we find that we are like a great institution of some kind. Here is the brain, the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the nerves, and the muscles. Each department acts separately, and yet is connected absolutely with all the others. The entire system is under one supreme department, the mind. Now, if this ruling department is kept clean and full of kindly, beautiful thoughts, does it not seem natural that the rest will follow its lead, being so completely in its power? We realize this, and the mere realization is something done towards the accomplishment of an ideal life in a world of cleanliness and beauty. System is one of the finest tools in existence with which to build one's life into something worthwhile. The body must be run on a system as well as the mind. The stomach must not be overloaded with unnecessary food. The lungs must not be filled with impure air. The nerves must not be worn threadbare in riotous and ridiculous living. The muscles must be kept in trim with consistent exercise of the proper sort. We must recognize the wants, the needs of the physical system, and see that they are supplied. Roosevelt, perhaps more than any other living man today, has given vitality to the supreme necessity of cleanliness of mind and body. He has, by reason of his great prominence, been able to emphasize these two vital essentials. He called a spade, and his message went far. For those who knew the value of his words came nods of approval. Others took heed. From boyhood he has systematized his life, taking the exercise needed, filling his mind with the learning of the world, winning when others would have failed, profiting by experience allotted to him through fate's kindly offices and association with the healthy, true men. What has been the result? He has risen to the very pinnacle of human endeavor. No honors await him. He has lived consistently and cleanly, and he can look any man in the eye and say honestly, "I have lived as I have believed." It is not necessary to become president in order to live sanely, to gain from circumstances the fruits that are ours for the asking and which have fallen into Roosevelt's hands with such profusion. We cannot all become presidents, but we can all emulate a shining example of mental and bodily morale. Just as we plunge into the cold water in the early morning, so should we regularly during the day plunge into the society of those whose splendid enthusiasm is helping to make the world a better place to live in. They are the kind who go into the struggle with heads high and with clean hearts. Their eyes see beyond the daily toil of life. They are in touch with the big things, and it is up to us to keep step with them. They want us, and they will give us the glad hand. All they want to know is whether our courage is equal to our ambitions, and whether our house of life is kept in good order. And so we journey along together in all good nature, not forgetting to laugh as we live. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9. Consideration for others. Consideration for others is man's noblest attitude toward his fellow man. For every seed of human kindness he plants, a flower blooms in the garden of his own heart. In him who gives in such a way, there is no hypocritical feeling of charity bestowed. His very act disarms the thought. It is as natural for an honorable man to show consideration to others as it is for him to eat and sleep. Acts of kindness are the outward manifestations of gentle breeding, a refinement of character in the highest sense of the word. What would we do in this world without the helping hand, the friendly word of cheer, the thought that others shared our losses and cheered our victories? If consideration for our feelings and thoughts did not exist on this earth, we would never know the depths of the love of our friends. There would be no such thing as an earthly reward of merit. We know that no matter what happens to us in the battle of life, there will be someone to cheer us on our way. We may be strong and thoroughly able to rely upon ourselves, but there comes a time when we need friendship and sympathy. Society would crumble into dust without these influences. The family circle would degenerate into a hollow mockery if consideration each for the other was absent. It sweetens and makes wholesome what otherwise might only be an existence of monotonous toil. Consideration for others is the milk of human kindness. For what we do for others, our recompense is in the act itself. We should claim no other reward. Observation brings to view that they who give in real charity cloak their acts from the eyes of all save the recipient. Givers of this type rise to the supreme heights of greatness. It is a part of their wisdom to know what is best to be done, and they go about it as a pleasure as well as a duty. Consideration for others pays big dividends. It is a virtue that makes for strong friendships and true affections. Those who possess it have a hard time hiding their light under a bushel. In teaching fortitude to others, they partake of the same knowledge. In the hours of their own affliction, they retain their courage and keep their minds unsoured. They are the sure enough good fellows of life, and their presence is the signal for instantaneous good cheer. We all know them by their gentle knock at the door. In 1,000 ways they impress themselves upon our lives, have entered into our counsels, have given us the right advice at the right time, and when the sad day comes along, their strong shoulders are there for us to lean upon. Consideration for others is apt to be an inherent quality, but like everything else, it can be accentuated or modified according to our own determination. It is a growth that should be inculcated early in the lives of children, the earlier the better. A child's most impressionable age is said to be between its 4th and 5th years. Then is the time to teach it the little niceties of life, the closing of a door softly, tiptoeing quietly that mother may not be awakened from her nap. Tidiness, cleanliness, good morals, all of which are to become vital factors in a life of consideration for others. A great many of us have the desire to be of service to others, but timidity holds us back. Say, for instance, one might see a person in great distress, and because of diffidence withhold the proffered hand. Someone we've known who comes to the point of penury but has too much pride to ask assistance. We pass by, fearful that we might offend. How many times has this happened to us? Who knows but the best friend we have at this very moment would give us anything in the world if his pride would let him bridge that distance between us. Nevertheless, the desire to do the right thing was in itself helpful. The thought of doing something for someone was a correct impulse and should have been carried into action. Early in life we should have started our foundation for doing things in the cause of others. Putting off the time when we shall begin to obey our higher impulses toward helpfulness to our fellows is but a reaction in our own characters which dulls determination. We want to do it, but we won't. As time goes on, we just don't. That's all. Our good intentions have gone to pave the bottomless pits containing our unfulfilled heart promptings. We meant well, but we failed to act. We didn't have the courage. Our failures spread a gloom before us. We lost our chances for a happy life. The man with the ability to laugh has little diffidence about these matters. Having confidence in himself and being happy and alert, he goes to the friend in need with courage and the kind of help that helps. If he doesn't do it directly, he finds a way to reach him through mutual funds. He does not go about parading his kindness either. He has gained a sincere and beautiful pleasure out of aiding an old friend, and he can go on his way rejoicing that life is worth living when he has lived up to its higher ideals. Consideration for others does not necessarily involve only the big things. It is the sum and total of numberless acts and thoughts that make for friendship and kindliness. People who are thoughtful surely brighten the world. They are ever ready to do some little thing at the correct moment, and after a time we begin to realize how much their presence means to us. We may not notice them the first time, or the third, or the fifth, but after a while we become conscious of their persistence and we esteem them accordingly. Such men are the products of clean, straightforward lives. They are never too busy to exchange a pleasant word. They do not flame into anger on a pretext. Their code of existence is well ordered and filled to the brim with lots to do and lots to think about. The old saying, "If you want anything, go to a busy man," applies to them in this regard. The busier men are, the more time they seem to have for kindliness. Another word for consideration is service. Nothing brings a greater self-reward than a service done in an hour of need or a favor granted during a day's grind. The generous man who climbs to the top of the ladder helps many others on their way. The more he does for someone else, the more he does for himself. The stronger he becomes, the greater his influence in his community. Doing things for others may not bring in bankable dividends, but it does bring in happiness. Such actions scorn a higher reward. We have only to try out the plan to learn the truth for ourselves. A good place is to begin at home, then the office, or wherever life leads us. And in doing these things we will laugh as we go along. We will laugh and get the most out of living. Our little day-by-day kindnesses, when added together, constitute in time a huge asset on the right side of our ledger of life. We should start the day with something that helps another get through his day, even if it isn't any more than a smile and a wave of the hand, and he will remember us for it. It is said that advice is cheap, and for that reason is given freely. But the proper kind of advice is about as rare as the proverbial hen's tooth. In order to give real advice, we must understand the man who asks for it. If what we say to him is to become of value, We must see to it that his mind is put in proper shape to receive advice. Be sure that he laughs, or smiles at least, before we seriously take up his case. And when we have done our stunt in the way of advice, let's send him away with a fine good humor. A friendly pat on the back as he goes out our doorway may mean a bracer to his determination. "You'll put it over," we shout after him. And thus we have been of real help. He needed sympathy and courage. He needed a cheerful spirit, so came to us, and we didn't let him go away until we gave him all these. Bully for us. Consideration for others does not admit of ostentation and hypocrisy. We never allow our left hand to know what our right hand does in charity, nor do we boast of our helpful attitude toward our fellow men. It is well to make a point of this fact. In this world are many ne'er-do-wells who fail to profit by advice and thereby become professional in the seeking of favors. Consideration owes them nothing, and to withstand their persistent appeals would in time dull our natural tendencies toward helping others. The world helps those who help themselves. We have little admiration for the man who is forever whining. Society has no work for such people as these. When we have exhausted every means of helping such a man, we must, in self-defense, pass him up before he contaminates our sense of justice. We must keep our visions clear. Consideration for others is a prime refinement of character. To be able to use it in our daily lives becomes one of our great consolations. Sympathy begets affection and kindly deeds. In a relative sense, it binds together the properties which go to make the soul within us. Browbeating, scolding, irascibility, and the like are microbes which react against the milk of human kindness, to which, if we succumb, leaves us stranded and alone amid a world of friendliness and good fellowship. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10. Keeping Ourselves Democratic. Big words and pomposity never were designed for the highest types of men. Our great national figures have almost without exception had one quality which was a keynote to their ultimate success. This was their simplicity. Next was their accessibility. There are numberless big-hearted and big-brained individuals in the world whose duties are so manifold that in order to accomplish what has been placed in their hands, they must be saved from interruption, but the truly great individual is never hidden away entirely from his fellow man. He never becomes such a slave to detail that he does not find time to fraternize with ordinary mortals. We do not find him concealed behind impenetrable barriers, guarded and pampered by courtiers like unto a king on his throne, or tucked away in some dark office. He wants to know everybody worthwhile, and everybody worthwhile is welcomed by him. He does not affect to know so much that he cannot be told something new. He is not the sort to refuse to see us at any reasonable time. We should not confound greatness, however, with notoriety. A man who by virtue of large publicity has compelled public notice isn't necessarily a great man, no matter how hard he may strive to make himself appear so. Especially is this true of the man who does not make a personal success corresponding to his advertised fame. In time he may have the earmarks of notability, but as Lincoln said, you can't fool all of the people all of the time. It is to be noted with satisfaction that the big captains of industry keep themselves free from petty details. "I surrounded myself with clever men," said Andrew Carnegie in accounting for his success, and by the same token the men who took over his great affairs and gave them larger scope and power surrounded themselves with still other clever men, thus reserving their judgment and thought for the higher policies of their institution. They kept themselves in readiness for consultation, and having men of initiative and self-reliance underneath them, they find time to take in hand other affairs than those of the tremendous businesses they manage. Men of this type often become prominent in public affairs and develop into highly important citizens. The bigger the man, the less he encumbers himself with matters which can be delegated to others. His desk is clear of all litter and minutiae, likewise his mind. Such men keep their physiques and mentalities in fine working order and are not to be goaded into ill temper. A refinement of mind is supremely essential to the man who desires to climb to the very top of the ladder. He cannot afford to close his brain to outside information. He is forced to keep it open in order to let in continuous currents of new thought. He does not want his visage to cream and mantle as a standing pond, as Shakespeare aptly puts it. Therefore, the windows of his thinking department are kept open for refreshing draughts from the outside. He reasons that always there are new guests, new faces, new things to talk about at the banquet board of life. And here is the point. If men who carry on the great industries of the world find a way to keep themselves democratic, surely men of less importance should be able to do the same? The snob is about as offensive a person as could be described. He is usually a hypocrite or an ignoramus, sometimes both. His pomposity is naturally repellent. We easily become accustomed to dodging such characters. The detriment is theirs, not ours. They are left by the wayside and, sooner or later, wake up to the fact that they stand alone in the world. The world loves the man with an open mind. This is the usual spirit of the progressive citizen. He wants to know, and by reason of his accessibility, knowledge is brought to him. No one cares to take up the task of informing the egotist who already knows it all. Such is his inherent cussedness that we would rather let him warp in the oven of his own half-baked knowledge. Life is too short to waste our time in educating him. "How can I see Mr. So-and-so?" says one man to another. "Don't try," is the answer. "He's not worth seeing. You can't tell him anything." And this sort of a chap misses the big opportunities just because he chooses to build up a reputation for being exclusive. He digs himself a hole and crawls into it and pulls the hole in after him. We can safely imagine him treating the members of his family as though they were servants and his employees as though they were slaves. He may succeed in small things, but in the big game of life we may write him down as a failure. If we have a big idea, we take it to a big man, the man of vision. Anything less is to putter around aimlessly. The bigger he is, the more democratic. He will not look for imperfections in our personal makeup when we show him the new process we have discovered. To be democratic is a triumph of the soul, tending to bring us in close touch with the throbbing heart of humanity. There is no isolation for those of unaffected charm and manner, no barrier in the way of friendship worth having. It is our lack of judgment if we hide ourselves so that we cannot be approached. No matter how high we rise, for the sake of our own brains, we must allow men of ideas to get to us. We must not allow our minds to become stagnant. If we fail to get into daily contact with other people, we soon grow dull and uninteresting even to ourselves. Great men may have no time to fritter away, but they have plenty of leisure for men worth while, the pushers and the thinkers. A democratic spirit does not come to the selfish man. He is absorbed in himself and is quite a hopeless case. He is a natural-born fault-finder and grouchy by nature. For him life holds no joy save the one in sight. Taking the big look at the man of this type, we can only be sorry for him because of his lack of early training. He started off on the wrong foot and thereafter drifted along. Seldom do we overcome the habits with which we arrive at man's estate. Those who do are entitled to a right-hand seat among the chosen. Being democratic is another phrase for being human and kind. It means that we ought to be able to see behind every face and find the truth of that individual's existence. It means that life is largely a matter of how we look at it, and being human is one way to get the proper slant at things. The human mind has great adaptive power and can be molded into 1,000 ways of thinking. The intelligent man, the man who has taken stock of himself, is able to smile and extend a hearty hand clasp whenever he feels tip-top or not. He doesn't have to look glum simply because the world hasn't thrown itself at his feet. He has only to persevere and success will come eventually. We must correct our failings as we go along or we will slip down into the rut and stay there. It is a simple matter to be good-natured and full of the zest of life if we poise ourselves right, keep ourselves democratic. It is this great soul quality which brings us true friends and boosts us into the fulfillment of our ambitions. Then we may truly laugh and live. End of chapter 10. Recording by Tom Weiss, Tom'sAudiobooks.com.